On the last night of Constantinople, no one slept. Mothers held their children in silence. Priests whispered prayers beneath trembling candlelight. Wounded soldiers climbed back onto the walls, and beyond the darkness, the Ottoman camp burned with thousands of fires. Everyone inside the city knew what was coming. There would be no rescue, no miracle army from the west, no second chance. Only the walls. Only the night. And the last emperor of Rome, waiting for sunrise. By morning, the city that had survived 1,000 years would fall, and an empire older than many nations would vanish forever. Constantinople was not just a city, it was a memory, a crown of stone placed between Europe and Asia. For centuries, it had been the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the last living piece of ancient Rome. Its streets had seen emperors crowned, its churches had heard voices rise like thunder. Its markets had carried silk, gold, spices, and rumors from every corner of the known world. At its center stood Hagia Sophia, a church so vast that visitors said it seemed to hang from heaven itself. And around it all were the walls, the great Theodosian walls, massive, layered, almost impossible to break. For generations, those walls had made Constantinople feel eternal. But nothing on earth is eternal, not even Rome. By the middle of the 15th century, the empire was a shadow of what it had been. The Byzantines still had the name, still had the emperor, still had the great city. But outside the walls, their world had shrunk. The lands that once fed them were gone. The armies that once defended them were gone. The wealth that once filled their palaces had faded into memory. Constantinople was now an island of the past, surrounded by the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. And at the head of that empire stood a young sultan named Mehmed. He was only 21 years old, but he carried the ambition of a man who believed history had been waiting for him. Others had tried to take Constantinople. He would not try. He would finish it. Mehmed understood something simple. If Constantinople lived, the Ottoman Empire would always have a wound in its center. The city sat like a locked gate between his lands, a Christian fortress in the middle of his future. So he prepared with terrifying patience. He built a fortress on the Bosphorus to cut the city's throat from the sea. He gathered soldiers from across his empire. He brought engineers, ships, siege towers, and most frightening of all, he brought cannons. Huge cannons. Weapons so powerful that the people of Constantinople could hear them before they fully understood what they meant. The old walls had been built for arrows, for ladders, for stones. They had never been built for thunder. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI knew what was coming. He was not a young man dreaming of glory. He was a ruler standing at the edge of extinction. He sent desperate requests for help to the west. He asked Christian kingdoms to come, to defend the city, to save the last remnant of Rome. Some help came, but not enough. A few ships, a few foreign fighters, a brave Genoese commander named Giovanni Giustiniani. But no great army, no miracle from Europe. The city would have to face the storm mostly alone. And Constantine understood the truth. He could not defeat Mehmed in the open field. He could only hold the walls and hope the world remembered him before it was too late. The siege began in April. At first, Constantinople endured as it had endured so many times before. Ottoman cannons roared, the walls shook, stones cracked, dust fell into the streets. Then defenders repaired the damage at night with barrels, timber, earth, and whatever broken material they could find. By morning, the wall stood again. wounded, but alive. Day after day, the city breathed through impact and repair, thunder and silence, thunder and silence. The people began to measure time not by sunrise, but by cannon fire. Children learned the sound of fear. Mothers learned to sleep lightly. Priests prayed over men who would return to the walls before their wounds had closed. And still, the city held. Then Mehmed did something that seemed impossible. The Golden Horn, the harbour beside Constantinople, was protected by a great chain stretched across the water. The Byzantines believed that side was safe, but one morning they looked out and saw Ottoman ships inside the harbour. Mehmed had dragged them over land, across greased logs, over the hills, into the water behind the chain. It was not just a military move, it was a message. The city was no longer surrounded on one side, it was surrounded everywhere. Hope became thinner after that. Food grew scarce, the wounded multiplied, the walls became weaker. And yet the defenders did not surrender, because some cities do not fall only when their walls break. They fall when their people stop believing. And Constantinople had not stopped believing. Not yet. But by late May, everyone could feel the end approaching. The cannons had opened wounds in the land walls. The defenders were exhausted. Justiniani and his men held the most dangerous section near the gate of St. Romanus. Constantine moved among the soldiers like a man already half in legend. He encouraged them, he thanked them, he reminded them what stood behind them, their homes, their churches, their families, their dead, their faith, their history, everything. Outside the walls, Mehmed prepared for the final assault. Inside the city, people understood. There would be no more waiting, no more negotiations, no more borrowed time. Only night, and then judgment. On May 28th, the people of Constantinople gathered for one final prayer. In Hagia Sophia, Greeks and Latins prayed together. Men who had argued over doctrine stood shoulder to shoulder. Nobles, soldiers, mothers, children, monks, merchants, all beneath the great dome. Candles trembled in the darkness. Voices rose into the vast space. Some wept, some confessed. Some stood in silence because fear had emptied them of words. For one night, the wounded city became one people, not divided by politics, not divided by old hatred, just human beings, waiting for the last morning of their world. And when the service ended, the soldiers returned to the walls. Constantine XI is said to have asked forgiveness from those around him. Then he mounted his horse and rode into the final hours of the empire. After midnight, the Ottoman assault began. The darkness erupted. Drums thundered. Trumpets cried. Men shouted in many languages. Waves of soldiers moved toward the walls carrying ladders, shields, hooks, and fear. The defenders fired arrows, dropped stones, poured fire. The first waves were thrown back. Bodies gathered beneath the walls. But Mehmed had numbers, and he had patience. He sent wave after wave, each one exhausting the defenders more than the last. The city was not being attacked by an army. It was being worn down by time itself. Then came the elite Janissaries, fresh, disciplined, relentless. They advanced toward the broken section of wall where the defense was weakest, and there, the fate of Constantinople began to crack. Justiniani was wounded. Sources disagree on exactly how it happened, but what mattered was what the defenders saw. Their strongest commander was leaving the wall. Some thought he had abandoned them. Some panicked. Some simply lost heart. In a siege, fear spreads faster than fire. At almost the same time, Ottoman soldiers found a way through, maybe through a small gate, maybe through a breach, maybe through chaos. But suddenly, the cry went up. The enemy was inside. The walls that had protected Constantinople for 1,000 years had finally failed. Emperor Constantine XI understood. There would be no retreat, no throne to return to, no empire left to govern. According to later tradition, he removed his imperial ornaments so he would not be recognized. Then he rushed into the fighting, not as a distant ruler, not as a man protected by gold, but as a soldier among the last defenders of his city. No one knows exactly where he died. No one knows who struck him down. His body was never certainly identified. And maybe that is fitting, because in that final moment, Constantine did not belong to himself anymore. He belonged to the city. And as Constantinople fell, the last emperor of Rome disappeared into the crowd of the dead. By morning, the city was taken. Ottoman soldiers poured through the streets. The defenders were broken. The bells were silent. The cross above the old empire had fallen. Mehmed entered the city later that day. He was still young, victorious, the conqueror of a dream that had haunted kings for centuries. When he entered Hagia Sophia, the great church became a mosque. Constantinople became the capital of a new empire. The world had changed. Trade routes shifted. Old powers trembled. Scholars fled west with ancient knowledge. And the Byzantine Empire, the last shadow of Rome, was gone. But the fall of Constantinople was not only the story of conquest, it was the story of an ending. The ending of a city that had carried the weight of centuries. The ending of prayers spoken beneath a dome while the enemy waited outside. The ending of an emperor who chose to die with his people instead of survive without them. History often remembers the winners, their banners, their titles, their triumphs. But sometimes the defeated leave behind something even stronger. A final image. A city in darkness, walls broken, candles burning, an emperor riding toward death, and people praying as the world they knew came to an end. Constantinople fell in the morning, but its last night still echoes through history.